gonna follow the phonetics.
Yeah, but that's why.
Question pops in her head, she calls.
Just takes a second to load.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is 9 a.m. The live stream and recording has commenced. You may begin your meeting.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Good morning, Council. I see that we have quorum. I therefore call this meeting, regular council meeting on November 20th in session. We'll now ask everyone to stand who may for the national anthem.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Now, as is our custom, we have the land recognition statement to be read, and this week, Councillor Kerr has the honor.
The town of Pelham is situated on treaty land, steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Haudenosaunee, Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island live and work in Niagara. The town of Pelham stands in solidarity with all Indigenous peoples, past and present, acknowledging that our high standard of living is a result of the resources and lasting friendship of Indigenous peoples.
Thank you, Councillor. I now turn to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do believe that brings us to item 4, and I do believe that there's an amendment to the agenda moved by Councillor Hildebrandt and seconded by yourself, that the agenda be amended to consider bylaw number 81/2024 prior to the presentations this morning. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Any discussion on the amendment? Not seeing any. I will call the vote. All those in favor? I see none opposed. Approval is amended, the agenda is amended. To the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and therefore we have the motion to adopt the agenda as amended.
Okay. Any discussion on the agenda as amended? Not seeing any. All those in favor? None opposed. Motion carries.
Excellent, thank you. That brings you to item 5, being disclosure of pecuniary interests.
After viewing the agenda, does any council member have a general point of interest to declare? Not seeing any, I inform the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Therefore, our next item on the agenda is consideration of bylaw 81/2024, being a bylaw to regulate odor in the town of Pelham, and repeal bylaw 4202/2020. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So any discussion on this, on the bylaw? We moved it, Councilor Hildebrand and I moved it up at the request of some citizens that are here to witness this today. The bylaw has indeed been discussed at length by council. Any other comments or discussion on the bylaw before I call the vote? I turn to Deputy Mayor Wink.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We've received a number of correspondence from residents, so could someone please explain why an odorous facility, the definition that we've got there, designates cannabis as an industry, not as agriculture? So someone can clarify that for us. I think I have an understanding of it, but if we could have some further clarification on that.
And I turn to our legal department, Jennifer.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for the question, Deputy Mayor Wink. So the town has authority under the Municipal Act to regulate with respect to odor. However, the town does not have any authority to regulate with respect to agricultural operations. Under the normal farm practices protection board mandate, in the event that a municipal bylaw affects a normal farm practice carried on by an agricultural operation, the bylaw is inapplicable. So in this instance, because cannabis can be treated as an agricultural operation, it impacts our ability to regulate that kind of odor. So in order to address that, we've defined odorous facility as excluding an agricultural operation, because were we to include that in the definition of facility, the bylaw would become inoperative, as it cannot regulate agricultural operations.
Perfect, thank you.
Councillor. Oh, thank you, Councillor. Any other questions, comments? Not seeing any. I'll call the vote. All those in favor?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I do need a mover and a seconder on that motion.
I'm sorry?
I need a mover and a seconder on the motion to
sorry.
approve.
Jump the gun. Councillor Olson, you will move. Seconder by Deputy Mayor Wink. Again, I'll now call the vote. All those in favor? I see none opposed. Motion carries.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to item 6.1, our presentation this morning, and we are joined by Mr. Byron Tan of Watson & Associates. Mr. Tan, you are welcome to the podium.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us this morning, sir. You have the floor.
Good morning. Perfect. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, members of council, staff, and members of the public. Have that effect on people. I'm happy to be here today to provide you with a bit of an update to the development charge background study. If you recall, I was here almost 9-10 months ago to provide the mandatory public meeting under the Development Charge Background Study and the Development Charge Act. So we're here today actually just to provide you an update to that process, what's transpired since that time, and then to provide you with the revised calculations and next steps as we go through the DC process. So I do have a fairly short presentation prepared, and again, just summarizing what's transpired over the last few months. As I said, we'll go through some of the current DC rates, the calculated amounts, and then where you as a municipality stand compared to your others within the Niagara region. Now, just as a recap of the process, we started this process really near the end of 2022. worked with town staff, to go through a lot of the planning information, capital information, current inventory of assets, et cetera. And really all of that culminated to the background study that was prepared and published back on December 2023. Subsequent to that, we did have the mandatory public meeting under the Development Charges Act in February 21st. And it was through that time that there was a number of comments from your worship, from council, perhaps even the public as well, that really was the impetus for us to revisit some of the calculations, revisit the background study, and to see where we can make any adjustments where necessary prior to presenting it back to council. So since that time, basically through the summer months in April all the way to October, we worked with town staff, and we also had a collaborative approach with the development community. So we met with them a few times, some engaged, within this very room, and then some more so with staff, town staff, engaging with them on a one-to-one basis, really addressing their concerns. A lot of that information was prepared over the last 3-4 months, and we did have a stakeholder meeting with those members back on August 27th. And then subsequent to that, there was also some back and forth with communication and questions and answers. So since that time, we have recalculated the development charge background study, reassessed the capital program, and we provided an addendum report to the original background study, which was released on November 13th. And we're here today, to provide those findings to council for your hopefully approval. So just a little bit of a summary of the addendum. As I mentioned, we published the report back on December 20, 2023, had that mandatory public meeting on February 21st, and it was through that public meeting that we received a number of comments about, the number of capital items that were included, the quantum of it, and then the charge as well, which was increasing, I believe, if I recall, roughly around 27-28% of your current charges. And one of the comments from council was to keep it 20% or under. So that's where we had worked with staff, worked with the development community to try to identify specific projects that either could be delayed or that they can undertake, as part of a local service. And then that, the focus of the development charge study is obviously to take a look at the broader capital that would be required for the town. So since that time, we reviewed the capital program, and all of the changes are documented within the addendum report. So you'll see it's about just under 30 pages, but it does have sweeping changes pretty much for every single service. As you can see on the screen here, we've changed the services related to a highway, which is your roads, bridges, sidewalks, culverts, as well as your public works, facilities, fleet, and equipment. We changed the fire protection, parks and recreation, library, and then water and wastewater. Subsequent to that, or at least through this process, you may be familiar, but Bill 185 was actually released and passed on June 6, 2024. And that allows now for municipalities to essentially revert some of the changes that were instilled as part of Bill 23 back in November 22, 2022, which essentially provided a number of changes where we weren't allowed to include studies. We had a number of exemptions in terms of affordable housing that needed to be adhered to, as well as a number of definition changes as well. So since, through this process, since Bill 185 now came into effect, we've also updated the background study to now re-include studies as a growth-related service. So what that means is for a municipality or any municipality within Ontario that has DCs, you're now allowed to collect for, say, transportation master plans or water master plans or any studies that you would need in order to undertake capital works, as long as it's a DC eligible service. So you had this in your current bylaw already. This new bill just essentially reaffirmed that they gave you the powers back via the motions that were taken away through Bill 23. So just a little bit of a recap. If you recall through my presentation back in February, basically the bylaws within Ontario for development charges now have to provide an affordable exemption. So if it's affordable rental or affordable owned units, and they are deemed affordable under the Development Charges Act, then you cannot charge them DCs. And the act basically, so there was two, Bill 134, the Affordable Homes and Good Jobs Act, provided an income qualifier to these affordable definitions. So when you probably first heard my presentation, it had said, what's considered affordable can be no higher than 80% of the average market rent or purchase price of a home. Well, Bill 134, which is now in effect as of June 1st, essentially says now that if it's affordable, it has to meet an income criteria. So it's the lesser of either the average purchase price or average rental price, or the 30th percent of the 60th percentile of income within a municipality. So the province actually does publish a bulletin, which it's all available online, to actually define what is considered affordable within the town of Pelham. So I've actually noted that in a subsequent slide, and you'll see what is considered affordable in the municipality. And then with Bill 185, I mentioned earlier, this was enacted on June 6th of this year, and it removed the mandatory phase-in of charges. So if you recall when I had said the moment you pass your bylaw, it had to go down to 80% and then creep up by 5% per year. Well, that's gone now. So the province recognized that this mandatory phase-in wasn't assisting municipalities with having to take care of their capital initiative. So they've removed that mandatory phase-in. I already mentioned the studies are now re-included as part of the calculations. And one of the other items that we changed from a policy perspective is to decrease the rate freeze of zoning bylaw applications and site plan applications from a period of 2 years to 18 months. So what that means is, if you recall, if a development were to come forward to the town and have a site plan application or zoning bylaw amendment, then the rates as of that day are frozen up to a period of 2 years from when you approve that application. So that means, as long as I pull a building permit within that 2-year period, I'm still paying the old rates, plus interest. The province changed that now to 18 months. So they want, the development to proceed faster. They don't want the rates frozen for an extended period of time. So they carved off 6 months from the back end. And then there's some process for minor amendments. Doesn't affect you. However, for those municipalities that did pass a bylaw post November 28, 2022, when Bill 23 came in, this process for minor amendments allows them to basically pass a minor bylaw in order to reintroduce studies back in or remove the mandatory phase-in without having to go through an appeal process or anything like that. So it's a very quick process. And then one of the, I believe, a good position from Bill 185 was the modernization of public notice requirements. So historically, under the Planning Act, the Development Charges Act, any notices have to be published within a newspaper, right? In the clerk's opinion, that's widely circulated to the public. Well, not a lot of municipalities have newspapers, so they would have to take a lot of money and publish into one of the major ones. So what essentially the modernization of the public notices means is you can now publish notices on your website in the absence of a newspaper. So a little bit more getting with the modern times. So as I mentioned, affordable exemptions are now in effect as of June 1st of this year. So if you are to receive any applications that are deemed affordable under the Development Charges Act for any owned units or rental units, they are deemed exempt under the DC. And what you can see on the screen here, what's considered affordable monthly rental units within the town. If you're a bachelor or studio apartment, the rent has to be less than $949 per unit. A one-bedroom has to be less than $1,229. Two-bedroom, $1,394. And then a three-bedroom or more, $1,484. Similarly, for owned units, so personal purchases of a home, it is deemed affordable if the single-family, semi-detached, as well as a townhouse, if the sale price, or the purchase price, I should say, is less than $463,500. With respect to apartments, the apartments have to be less than $405,000. So unless the developers and the builders meet these prices, then they are still, imposed a development charge. If the sale price is less than this amount, they don't pay a DC. Okay, so this is what's considered affordable, and it will be updated, I believe, annually based on the bulletin that the province releases. And then, as you can see in my last note, the attainable units. This is yet to be defined by the legislation, so we have it in your draft bylaw. but it's not in effect yet. So at least once it is enacted, we don't have to go in and update, your exemptions. It's already written in there for when it's effective. So just as a reminder, these are your current rates that are presented on the screen. They are slightly different than what was presented in the background study, partially because you do index your rates at the beginning of the year. So these rates are effective as of January 1st, 2024. As you can see right now, for a single-family home or semi-detached dwelling, receiving full services, which means you pay all the town-wide services as well as water and wastewater, the development charges is $29,240. As we go from left to right of the screen, the smaller the unit size, the less people within them, hence the DC correspondingly decreases. So for a multiple or a townhome, full services is $20,830. The apartments vary between $12,240 to just over $20,000. And then we have your special care dwellings. Again, these are more of the per bedroom, per unit basis, more for your, your special care like retirement homes, etc. And then we also have, non-residential, and that's typically done on a per square foot basis. So for full services, we're at $13.47. Now, just to recap, back in December, when we did release the background study and present it to council on February of this year, these were the calculated charges as per the background study. So you can see here the single semi-detached dwelling was about $37,700, all the way to the non-residential at $17.23. As I mentioned, through the last few months, there's been some very fruitful discussions, a real, effort to reassess and re-examine the capital program, looking at what is realistic within the next 10 years, what can be pushed out, et cetera. And with that being said, the calculated rates as per the addendum report now have a single and semi-detached dwelling charge of $34,990. And then the corresponding charges from left to right, again, you can see with the townhomes at $26,200, $24,650 for the apartments, just under $16,000 for the small apartments, and then $13,350 for the special care, and then $16.35 for non-residential. And through council's comments, one of the things was to keep it within the 20%. This is actually about 19.5% compared to the original current charges. So we did keep council's comments in mind back in February. Now, in terms of the rate comparison, as you can see, so again, we're going from $29,240, and with the recalculation, it's now $34,999. You can see there that there were some reductions in the roads category, the services related to the highway. So instead of $14,100 that was calculated back in December, we're now down to $13,667. Library also went down, from $965 to $527. And then even with the reintroduction of growth studies, based on what you have over the next 10 years, it is smaller than what is currently in effect right now of $1,000. And then you can see also, from the water services, we took a look at a number of the water mains and the waterworks, and that has decreased almost $1,100. From $3,200 to $2,100. Now, there was a slight increase to the wastewater because there was some reassessment of some of the wastewater mains, which now we have some better estimates. Hence, it went up by about $300. But overall, again, the charges did go down from $37,700 to $34,900. In terms of non-residential, same idea. We started off at $17.23 back during the calculated background study in December. And with these changes, we're now down to $16.35 and similar types of services that have been adjusted. Now, in terms of the comparator of where Pelham is compared to the other municipalities within Niagara, you can see in the orange, and sorry, let me take a step back. How to interpret the graphs, if you recall, the green sliver at the very bottom of the bar charts is the education DCs. Those are something that the school boards do impose, and you as a municipality have to collect and remit to them. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. It is something that you must undertake and collect. And then we have the upper tier charge, so Niagara region, they collect the development charge, and that's reflected in the gold bars at the bottom. And then all the lower tiers are in the blue that are noted above. So you can see here within the bar charts, Pelham right now in its current form is right in the middle with the orange arrow. What we had calculated back in December would have been the pink arrow to the left, but with this revised calculation, as per the addendum, we're now just going just around West Lincoln's development charge rates. And then from a commercial standpoint, you could see here we really just moved one ranking. So basically, from your current, just going above Fort Erie's charge within the comparators of municipalities in Niagara. And then lastly, with industrial, again, just moving up from Fort Erie. Right now we're just we're to the left of the bar chart here, and with these recalculations, this is where the new calculations are landing. So that concludes my presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, sir, for the presentation of the amendments. Any questions from council on the work that we've been shown? Councilor Kerr.
Yes, I just want to make sure relative, thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, that the comparatives for single semi-detached, are these based with the most recent values of all of the other communities? Because we know since our original discussion, a number of communities came in with fairly massive increases in their DCs. So I'm just trying to figure out whether this is reflective as of what they've approved and what we would potentially be approving.
Through your worship, that is correct. It is in effect as of when we prepared the presentation, which would have been November 10th, November 13th, around that time. Now, keep in mind, there are, I believe, 3 or 4 municipalities that are just doing some minor amendments due to Bill 185. If you recall my presentation earlier, municipalities are now allowed to add back studies to the mix. So that charge can range in value. So they're still going through that mandatory, process in order to update their bylaws. So they have until, I believe, December 6th in order to do so. So any municipalities that haven't done that yet, their charges would not be reflected here. But anyone with a past bylaw as of November, that's reflected within that charge.
Councilor?
Yes, thank you. I just, like I say, we all see the media when you see this different municipalities with rather substantial hikes relative to our original discussion. That's all. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor. Any other questions? I'll go with Councilor Niznik.
Yes, thank you, through you. I think this might be a question for our treasurer. So I see that the original calculated was 37.7, and now we're moving to 34.9. So the difference of approximately $3,000 per single family home. So I guess if originally it was felt that that was needed in order to make our town vibrant and be able to create the services needed, how will we make up that difference of the $3,000 that we won't be gathering now?
To the treasurer.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Mayor, well, that rate comes from the background study. So it's not as if we randomly decrease that amount. It's based on the projects that we have listed and the portion that the developers need to pay. So I don't know if I'm answering the question correctly, but it shouldn't impact us because we've changed the projects that were originally there. Like some of those capital projects came off, others came on. So the calculation that's there is based on what is needed and what we can charge the developers. Byron, if you wanted to add to that.
Yes, through your worship, just echoing Ms. Quinlan's, comment, we're not artificially just, decreasing the charge. There was a reassessment of the capital program to see what would be included, let's say, within the next 10 years or the next 27 years versus what really can be pushed out or delayed or just, not proceed, for the town to not proceed with. And then again, through working with the public works staff and all the other wonderful staff of the town, there was also a relook of the actual capital estimates for each item. And then as well, if there are any grants or any other external funding that was available, we made sure that those were included and adjusted for as well. So we're trying to look at all different facets of revenues that would be included as part of the calculations. But the main impetus of the calculation change was a look at the capital program and see what could be in and what could be out.
Okay, thank you, Council. Any other questions? I had Council Olson first.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Tana. I learn something every time you speak, so I appreciate that. I have a question about interest. I'm on page 8, reference page 8 of the Meridian Center. We've got a discounted interest attached to it. Then you go to library, which is reference 5.6, and there's no discounted interest attached to the cost of the library and the fire hall for that matter. Is there a reason why the interest is included in some of the charges? And I'm making the assumption that we're looking at the principal balance when we put that on there, or when the Meridian Center is on there and it's got discounted interest. And my second part of the question, which is probably easier, is there's the interest charge. Is that the cost of capital to the town, or is that prime plus one, or stipulated in some way?
To the presenter.
Through your worship, so I'll try to answer that in twofold. So just doing this off of memory of what's included in the background study, my recollection is that the Meridian Center, or at least within the Parks and Recreation capital sheet, that's actually a debt amortization schedule that's been included as part of the DC. So with any debt payments, when you are recovering it under the Act, we have to discount the payments. Now, we show it as discounted interest because optically we want to see what the full principal is, so that way you can see how much the dollar is. But what we do on the back end is actually we discount the payments that the town or municipality makes over the the life or the amortization of the debt. The reason for that is you index your charge, or you index your bylaw every year, right? So by us discounting it, we're then assuming that any rates that we are including as part of the DC, when the DCs are inflated or indexed on an annual basis, you're not over collecting on the debt. Because if we included the full amount of the debt, then essentially you're inflating the debt when you inflate your background set or your bylaw, which then you're collecting more money to your debt than what you really should be. So that's why we have a discounted amount, so that the development community, they're not overpaying for debt that has a fixed payment in the next 20, 30 years. So that's why we did that for the Meridian Center. Now, if I recall, I don't believe there was any other debt that was identified for the library nor the fire, and I think that's why there was no interest line. Correct me if I'm wrong. So I believe there was no debt for those two capital items. It was just the actual the capital estimate of the new facility that would be proposed to be built or purchased.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, we've got a calculation that's based on some certainty about the amount of debt we're going to have and what the payments are going to be. But we also know that we're probably going to be debenturing the fire hall and a portion of the library. So my question then, more precisely, is why didn't we include the interest on those debts? I mean, I don't think there's much speculation on how we're going to finance it. It's going to be debentured. So,
To the treasurer, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, with regards to the fire station, that is the principal and interest payments are being funded through the debt reserve fund that we have. So that's why it's not going through the DC. And with regards to the library, we will be bringing a report back to council on December 4th, looking at the different options and how we're going to fund the library. So at the time when the DC study was done, the assumption was that we would be getting the grant funding. So now we're going to be looking at different options in case we don't get the grant funding, and how much council wants to contribute towards the library. So that's going to be coming back on the 4th.
Councillor?
yes, well, be that as it may, the town has a cost of capital, regardless of where it comes from. Why wouldn't we use that as part of the DC charges? Just a,
Through you, Mr. Mayor, because it's not DC debt. We can only use, we can only include the interest and principal payments if it's DC debt. It's not DC debt. It's going to be part of the tax levy.
okay.
Okay, Councillor?
Yes, thank you. The recommendations that you make in the report here, in the addendums, and I'm looking at the item 7.4A, the area rating, and you make the recommendation that we do all the services are not broken down by area except for water. Then, have we given adequate consideration to that? I don't think there's a wrong answer here, but I think that's the right answer, but we're required by the Act to consider that.
To the presenter?
Yep, through your worship. So we did, as a team, we did consider the area rating calculations. So as part of the DC process, we did go through the calculations of looking at it from, your current practice of area rating on an urban versus rural basis versus looking at it, by area. And it was through the collective discussions with staff that, what would be provided to council was to continue status quo of the urban versus rural area rating metric.
Okay. And finally, this is my third question, Mr. Mayor, so. Yes, finally, we have a discount of 5% for non-residential use, and I gather that's, that we're just discounting the rate because of people who use, say, the MCC. We don't, we discount the rate by 5% for non-residential use, is that right?
Through your worship, I think you mean that we're allocating the non-residential cost between 95% residential and 5%
that's correct.
non-residential.
That's better
Okay,
said,
sorry.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's not a discount, it's just allocating some of the
okay.
costs. And historically, what we've seen is there's a number of, businesses and non-residents within the municipality that utilize your parks and recreation, because you may have some businesses that don't have, let's say, meeting spaces within their own offices, so then they'll rent something out through a rec center, or if they have like a company barbecue and maybe they don't want to do it in their parking lot, and they'll get a permit and then utilize one of your parks. So there is that use of non-residential with the parks and recreation services. So for us, we don't deem it appropriate for it to be 100% residential. There should be some component of that that's related to the non-residential community.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Eckert?
Yes, thank you. Just for my own benefit, I understand the concept of growth pays for growth. I understand that. There seemed to be some concern in the development industry of DC charges going towards old, not for new growth sort of thing. So I guess my question is a couple of folds, and it may be different people that have to answer this, but do we apply funds from the development charges to old, what I would consider older projects? So let's say the Pancake Lane urbanization. Does DC charges go towards that project at all? And I guess if so, how do we not justify, but how do we explain, because that's not new growth, but does it affect new growth? Like, you know what I mean? I'm just trying to figure out how DC charges, if growth is for growth, and we're doing an older street project that's been there for a long, long time, how do we justify using, if we do? I don't know that we do, so.
So more or less, Councillor, asking if DCs pay for the upgrades in old structure.
Sure. Yes, so through you, Mr.
I'll
Mayor, so
go-
my understanding is it only does, it does only if it enhances growth. I know we have some projects, and the Director of Public Works can expand on that let's say it's an existing street and we have to upsize the water main because there's growth coming. So even though it's in the existing area, it's not new, but because of the growth coming, we have to upsize the pipes, then that would have a DC component. I don't know if you want to add to that.
To the Director of Public Works, Mr.
Through
Moore.
Mr. Mayor, so exactly, so growth would pay
pay for the expansion of services. That could be upsizing a water main. In the case of Pancake Lane, there are no storm sewers. There are developments happening there. They need an outlet. So those storm sewers would satisfy those developments as well. So a portion of that would go to the development. Expansion of active transportation services as developments come online, things grow. We need places for people to go, travel safely. So that's another example, active transportation facilities on a reconstructed road. Not actually, unless it's an expansion of service, it would benefit existing more, but if it's an expansion of service, then portion of that would apply to the DCs.
Councillor?
It's exactly the answer I was looking for. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments on the report? Not seeing any. I thank the presenter, and I turn to the clerk. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, Councillor Olson. Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. Am I allowed a second chance?
Go ahead.
Yes, you make some other recommendations, including a reporting requirement of a certificate, which aligns to the new codes you have here, like the growth study part. Will we be receiving a motion, I guess, from the clerks, I guess, to incorporate that in our DC motion when it comes?
Through your worship, just to clarify, which certificate are you?
There's a treasurer's certificate of the
the treasurer, that's on the financial side. So I have to report once a year on how the funds in the reserve have been spent.
Yeah.
But I don't report on the growth, just on the actual capital projects.
The report, the recommendation was a report that showed the borrowings and the addition that was a certificate. Is that going to be part of our?
So on an annual basis, we do report to council on the DC obligatory reserve. So that is what you're referring to. So in June, a report every year is issued to council that shows the money that's been received for the DCs and how it's been spent.
The report I looked at was more transactional. It had the borrowings and everything from DC charge to DC charge, and I forget the number of it. I didn't write it down, but it was in the addendum report that you provided near the back.
Through your worship, I think what you're quoting is just one of the amended pages within the appendix of the original background study. So as part of the addendum, we typically attach any amended pages that would be changed from the original background study. And one of the ones you're probably quoting is the Appendix D, which would have been the reserve fund summary. So as part of the reserve fund summary, and as Ms. Quinlan Murphy had mentioned, through the reporting process, there's certain requirements that need to be undertaken that are either presented to council and then, if requested, submitted to the province. So if you do have any transactions between reserve fund balances from one DC reserve to the other, maybe some interborrowing, maybe you had some funds within a roads DC, but then your library DC was in a deficit, so you want to borrow some funds just to help with the library DC to pay for items, but then you have to track all of that. So that's more just, it's not a recommendation, it's actually just a requirement to say, make sure when you are doing your reporting, here's the items that you have to look at if it is in effect or applicable.
It seemed to be attached to your recommendation for what the heading should be on the new listings for including the growth studies and combining recreation to one column from indoor and outdoor, I think it was the old method. So
yes. So basically, those recommendations are more so just to streamline the nomenclature of your reserves, because under the Development Charges Act, there's only 19 eligible services. So historically, a lot of municipalities still have reserve funds that are called indoor recreation reserves and then outdoor recreation reserves. Our recommendation is, well, just combine those, because under the Development Charges Act, it's only called Parks and Recreation now. And then, for example, some would even call your growth studies general government, because that was the nomenclature, again, years ago. We just want to make sure that, for municipalities, if this is the list of 19 services, just try to name your reserves as such. So that's really what that is meant to capture.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments on the report? Not seeing any. Now I turn to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a motion put forth by Deputy Mayor Wink and seconded by Councillor Eckerd. Be it resolved that Council receive the development charge background study addendum overview presentation by Watson and Associates, and that Council receive the report, the addendum report to the December 20th, 2023 development charge background study prepared by Watson and Associates, and that Council directs staff to proceed with the preparation of the DC bylaw for consideration by Council on December 4th, 2024. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. One last time, any other comments or questions? Again, I see none. Call the vote. All those in favor? See none opposed. Motion carries. Again, sir, thank you for presenting today.
Perfect. Thank you. My pleasure.
To the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to item 6.1.2, and we are joined virtually this morning by Alexis Lazon of Real Term Energy for a presentation on streetlight conversion. In addition to the presentation this morning, Alexis is also available at this time to address any questions that Council may have on the staff report appended to the consent agenda.
Okay, thank you. You have the floor, sir.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the time this morning. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to present. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and if you could please confirm that you can hear me okay and that you can also see my screen. Are you able to see the presentation?
Yes, we may. Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So thank you very much again for the opportunity. So for the presentation, it's a quick summary of the work that was completed over 2 different phases for the LED streetlight conversion project. So the presentation includes a few slides that summarize the work that was done, the numbers of luminaires that were installed, and as well as some of the energy savings and cost savings that the town can anticipate to achieve from the project. So as a quick background over the scope of work that was completed and what the company is. So the company that completed the work is RT Energy Solutions. So I'm the Director of Operations for RTE, so I was working with members of the town for completing and executing on this work. So RT Energy Solutions, we provide turnkey services for LED streetlight conversion projects. We've done work with over 350 municipal and utility clients, of which over 200 of those are located in the province of Ontario. We've completed work on over 400,000 streetlight points in North America, and we're formerly known under the name of Real Term Energy. In terms of the scope of work that we completed for the town for this project under both phases, was first a GIS audit of the streetlight luminaires. We then completed some photometric lighting designs to help specify exactly which luminaires go at which location throughout the town. And the summary of the GIS audit and the design for each phase was accumulated in an investment grade audit that summarized the savings potential and final cost of each phase. Following the approval of that investment grade audit, we did the procurement. So we subbed out the installation work to qualified installation contractor, and we purchased the material that was required for installation, namely the LED luminaires and photocells. We then did the project management services and the installation supervision to ensure that the installation happened smoothly, on time, and on budget, and then assisted with billing changes since we're talking about unmetered lighting. So once those lights are installed, they need to be reported to both Hydro One and Niagara Peninsula Energy, since some lights were included in both service territory. And finally, the final closeout and commissioning, so punch list review and warranty documents, et cetera, were transferred over to the town. So in terms of the 2 phases that were completed, the first one started in November of 2022 from an installation point of view, and it ended in February of 2023. The first phase was around installing some Cobra-head luminaires based on a specific budget that the town had for that phase. The goal was to maximize the number of Cobra-head fixtures. Cobra-heads are your standard street lights. The Cobra-heads were prioritized first because they're the lower cost fixtures, so it allowed to do more lights under that phase, under the phase 1 budget. So there was 530 Cobra-head lights that were installed as part of that phase 1. Then phase 2 was targeting at establishing a budget to complete the roadway luminaires. So that phase 2 started in November of 2023 from an installation point of view, and was apologies for that. And was substantially completed in February, at the end of February in 2024. We're mentioning substantially completed because there was a change order that happened after to include some 31 side-mounted decoratives that were not in the original scope. So those were ordered at a later time, and the installation of those was completed later in this year, which are now done. So that total phase 2, including those side-mounted lights, was 1,005 luminaires that were installed. So phase 1 and 2 combined resulted in 1,535 total luminaires that were installed, overhead and decoratives. From an inventory point of view, this is just a summary of that work that was completed on a phase 1 and phase 2. So the table on the left that has all the different SKUs, these are the part numbers of the LED luminaires. So phase 1, the GCJ fixtures, those are all different types of Cobra heads, which you can see a sample image in the bottom right there. So the top left fixture, that's the Cobra head luminaire. So phase 2 included the completion of those Cobra heads, as well as various types of decoratives. So the second image next to the Cobra head there is one of the decorative post stops that was completed, and the one next to it is another type of post stop that was present in the town. And then the 31 different side-mounted luminaires, there's 2 different types, which you can see in those 2 bottom images, which were all completed as part of phase 2. The table that you can see in the top right corner just summarizes the different types of fixtures that were removed and accordingly retrofitted with the new LED luminaires. From a summary of savings point of view, so what we expect is about a 76% energy savings on the luminaires from going from the previous fixtures to the new LEDs. On the utility cost basis, and there was a little bit over 80% of the lights that were in Hydro One service territory. The balance was in Niagara Peninsula Energy service territory. We anticipate a savings opportunity of approximately $141,000 per year. And the annual maintenance cost we anticipate will go down by approximately $48,000 per year as a function of the LED upgrade. This is a combination of both phase 1 and 2 together. So we anticipate the overall streetlight expenditures will go down by approximately $190,000 per year from the combined work across these 2 phases. Now, in terms of billing change summary, so again, these are unmetered lights. So the way that the utilities bill these lights is based on a predetermined, let's say, number of hours and wattage that's associated with those fixtures. They're not being monitored when they're under this unmetered tariff. So there's no meter associated with them. So what that means is when work is happening to those inventory, it must get reported to the utility to summarize the new inventory that must get billed. So what we did in this project is there was a number of different billing changes that occurred for Hydro One based on the substantial completion of different milestones. So when we reached a milestone where there's a good number of lights that were installed, and there could be some lapse time due to pending, let's say, decorative lights arriving from a procurement basis, we then would submit a billing change. So the summary here shows first a table of what the monthly kilowatt hour drop was from Hydro One across these different phases. So effectively what we're doing for each of those submissions is we're reporting to Hydro One, here are the HPS lights that were removed, here are the new LEDs that were installed, and here's the difference in the energy consumption or the kilowatt hour from those 2 inventory. And then Hydro One would start billing the town for the lower amount, resulting in the savings of the kilowatt hour that are anticipated. So the final billing change occurred fairly recently in October of 2024, and that captured those final side mounts that were completed. For Niagara Peninsula Energy, the process was a little bit different. What they required from us was to send them the GIS data. They then matched up our points on the raw GIS data point of view, and then they updated their billing record based on the raw data. So Hydro One has the specific forms and templates that they require, whereas NPEI worked with us on a GIS basis to make those light match and ensure that their billing would then reflect the final inventory that were installed. We then QC'd and verified both of the utility billing changes once they were processed, and everything matched our anticipated records. So that was the quick summary that we have prepared today to walk you through over the 2 phases that were completed, but I'll open the floor if you have any questions for me.
Okay, thank you for that presentation. Any questions or comments? And I expected from Mr. Hildebrand. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the very detailed presentation. I really appreciate it. I think the project is an overall success. I see the changes there. The problem always is actually making the hardest part of a project like this is when you have a non-metered load you don't get the billing change quickly. And that's where the issue is that I have. When I look at your data, basically, your data tells me in phase one, we changed out 530 of 1,535 lights, which is approximately 34.5%. When you look at the wattage, just these are back of the envelope calculations. It looks like we reduced by 41.5% in the first term and 58% in the second term. So it's like 40-50% split. That's my rough calculations. The issue I see is from an actual recovery of the savings is that in 22, our electricity bill for streetlights was $208,004. In 23, it was $188,762, which is only a 10% savings, and yet we had a reduction in streetlights of, say, a third. So I expected the bill to go down by a third. And I know you've done a lot of these projects. Is this typical of what you see? The billing lag is huge, and there's a discrepancy of what's actually occurs on the invoice to the town and what we recover?
To the presenter?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So there's a very key factor here to keep in mind as it's specific to the town, and that is that Hydro One account has other lights on it that were not street lights. So that was a discussion that we'd had with the town staff, and it was confirmed that that's the case. And there's lights that would be associated with park lights. So those park lights would be a constant variable, if you will, throughout the billing change. So those lights are untouched. So they would remain as HPS throughout the process. As such, when we remove the kilowatt hours, because what we ensured was if there's X numbers of kilowatt hours that are anticipated to be removed from the bill, we made sure that was the exact amount that was deducted. Because the way that Hydro One bills, they'll bill a lump sum kilowatt hour. So we asked them to remove exactly what matched the inventory that we remove. But to that point, if there's park lights that are, if you will, being floated as a constant throughout that equation, the savings percentage will look lower as a result of that, because those lights would still be billed as HPS and still represent that according load on the inventory.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand your comment, but those lights and those bills for those lights are insignificant in terms of the percentage when you're looking at the total bill for streetlights. I mean, we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars for streetlights, and park lights aren't tens of thousands of dollars. So it still doesn't explain the lag between what we're actually seeing in the invoices and our projected savings from kilowatt hours. That's where my concern is.
To the presenter.
Oh, sorry. So in terms of processing the billing change, there's not a substantial time lag, generally speaking. Once the billing changes are submitted to Hydro One, as an example, Hydro One typically processes that within, I would say, 1 to 2 weeks. And then they use the closest reference billing cycle as the adjustment when that's made. So typically when the changes are submitted, then it's either going to be the next billing cycle, or if it rounds down, depending on the timing of the process, it'll be on, it could even be a slight retroactive adjustment on the most recent bill. So we don't anticipate there to be a long time lag from when those changes were approved and processed by Hydro One.
Councillor?
Thank you. I understand that. That's the same answer Hydro One gives me as well. But the problem is there still is a huge lag then from when you submit the changes to when it actually gets changed. That's the observation.
I guess my question, if I may, do you have other municipalities point out the same lag time as Councillor Hildebrand is pointing out?
Well, the billing changes, they do occur at the end of the install. In this specific case, we did multiple ones because there was, in some cases, pending material coming in, and we had installed, let's say, a couple hundred Cobra heads, so we processed the billing change to ensure faster savings for the town. But usually the billing changes end up getting processed within a month or two of when the installations happen, by the time the final GIS data is completed, reconciled, and then the changes are processed with the utility. So obtaining the right forms, for example, completing those forms, there's an approval process as well that we need to go through with the clients in terms of signing up on those inventories. We then submit it to the utility company. So I would say 1 to 2 months is usually the process time that we see from the installation completion until when those changes are then reflected on the bills themselves.
Councillor?
Through the presenter again. It looks like our final bill this year for streetlights is going to be in the neighborhood of about $110,000. And that's only a 50% savings in electricity. We're still short 10, 15, some 20% in our invoice. So maybe it's going to have to be to 25 before we reconcile, really get down to the number that you're showing on your sheet.
Any comment from the presenter?
I would say that we're happy to have a review of those invoices to identify if we see that there's any further investigation required. Just keeping in mind that the kilowatt hour savings is one item, then there's the actual cost per kilowatt hour, right? That can fluctuate over time depending on the tariffs, et cetera. But we're happy to have a look at the past 12 months bills and even the past 24 months bills just to verify that all those kilowatt hour do match. What we did verify is Hydro One submits, once they process the billing changes, a confirmation of here's the new kilowatt hours that are being billed under this account, and those kilowatt hours all match the consumption that we anticipate and that we reported to Hydro One.
Councillor?
That's fabulous. That's exactly the answer I was looking for. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I go to Deputy Mayor Wink.
Yes, through you, Mayor. Thank you for your presentation. Just a quick question. You mentioned warranties with respect to the new installs. How long is that warranty period for?
To the presenter.
So the hardware warranty is for a 10-year period from the original purchase. That's both on the luminaires themselves and on the photocells, the lighting device.
So if we have some issues with some of the luminaires, what's the process in getting them fixed?
To the presenter.
So the hardware warranty covers parts only. So it's not a labor warranty, and that's directly from the manufacturer. So if there's a failed hardware component, there's an RMA process for requesting a claim for a replacement. The replacement would then be provided directly from the respective manufacturer because there's more than one manufacturer in the project. There's a specific manufacturer for the cover heads, and then there's a different manufacturer for the decorative fixtures. But that RMA would be processed with the manufacturer, and then they would provide you a replacement part. In some cases, they would require the defective fixture to be returned for testing. In other cases, it could be recycled and disposed of. But there's a process in that regard, and we can help file those RMAs and or direct the town to the right party if that occurs and there's failures that need to be replaced.
Councillor?
So through you, Mayor, to either the director or the presenter, something was brought to my attention just on Monday where I went to a resident's property and he's got concerns that his decorative lighting is flickering and intermittent. So it's not on all the time. And so there's definitely issues with that. Just want to know the process and how we can get that fixed.
I'll go to Director of Public Works first.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So if there are any issues that the public identifies with respect to streetlights, they can go through our online portal, Spot It, Share It, file a complaint. We will take that complaint, create a work order, investigate the issue, and if it's a material issue, we'll look after going after warranty to replace that. If it's a workmanship issue, we've also got a contract in place with a contractor, lighting contractor that will service us and that looks after our street lighting repairs and replacements. So we would go through that process at that time.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll speak to you later about it because this particular individual has gone through the Spot It, Share It, and nothing seems to be happening about it. So we'll have a conversation later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other questions, comments on the report? Councillor Nesnick.
Yes, so thank you. Just to kind of follow up with Councillor Hildebrand's concern, I'm just wondering and I'm not sure who to address the question to, but is it possible that we can have a breakdown of the percentages of the non-LED lights versus the new street light LEDs and then calculate the savings that way? Because I think you're still feeling as though the proportion of non-LED kilowatt hour costs are too high for what we actually now have. Is that what I'm understanding from you, Councillor Hildebrand? I guess it's a question for you because you know this inside and out much better than I.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We do have charts from a couple of years ago where we have all the savings and the kilowatt hours for all the parks and all that. So we have all that detailed. And so we can present a report that details all that information.
Councillor?
Okay, I think that would maybe help clarify the reason for the discrepancy in the cost. Like you're still feeling as though we're being overcharged through Hydro One and not garnering enough savings with the new lighting system. Is that how you're feeling?
Councillor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think I'm feeling that there's a gap between when the street light changes are made and when the billing changes get made, and it doesn't occur. I think in 2025, we're going to get down to the number we expect to get down to. So I think the savings are going to occur, but it's just, there seems to be, from the data we're seeing, that the changes should have occurred a lot faster at the billing end. And I'm not sure where it is, because Hydro One's give me the story, don't worry, within 45 days, the bill should go down. So then it's either the notification of the load going down or Hydro One is taking longer than that to make the change to the invoice.
Councillor?
Okay, so maybe that review that you're suggesting will occur will help clarify that. That's great, thank you.
So just to, if I may, Councillor, so you're more than willing, it would appear, to give Hydro another 2 or 3 months before we have to delve any lower into the statistics?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think from the presenter, he's going to provide us with a review of his data. We'll take another look at the data again and then see where we're at. Because maybe we need a combination meeting with Hydro One after that.
Okay.
To see where we go. But
And
one
then,
other thing I'd like to mention is.
Go ahead.
The other significant cost that has gone down, which is not the electricity bill, but the maintenance bill. The maintenance bill is significantly less, which we expected. So I'm expecting it's going to be better than the forecast. Thank you.
Excellent. And they tell me that you've got a special room in Ontario Hydro now.
That's it.
Thank you, Councillor. I guess there is no other, any other comments on the report? Questions? Not seeing any. Thanks again to the presenter, and thanks for appearing before council.
Thank you for the opportunity. Have a good day.
And I turn to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Eckert. Be it resolved that council receive the real-term energy streetlight conversion presentation for information. To Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments? Not seeing any. Call the vote. All those in favor? Seen and opposed, motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to the adoption of council minutes. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Niznik, seconded by Councillor Hildebrand. Be it resolved that the following minutes be adopted as printed, circulated, and read. C-18, 2024, regular council meeting, November 6, 2024. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, any comment on the minutes? Not seeing any. Call the vote. All those in favor? Seen and opposed, motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to item 8 on the agenda. If there is now any items to which council would like to lift from the consent agenda, now would be the time to do so.
Okay, thank you. Any item in the agenda, the consent agenda, that any council would like to lift? Not seeing any. Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to the consent agenda. If any members of council would like to speak on a topic, now would be the time, and I can call it by category, Mr. Mayor, if you'd like.
Yes, please.
Okay, beginning with staff reports.
Okay, I see Councilor Olson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to speak to 9.1.1, the development charges background study. We had the response today about the interest on the fire hall and these other things. I'm not entirely satisfied that that's the case, but in any event, we're going to come up with an increase here of 19.7%, which is, after a long study, we put our hand in the air and pulled out a number that said 20% approximately. So I'm satisfied with that. I also wonder about the fact that we've got fire apparatus in the, and we're not debenturing some of these things, like, and I know that the policy reads rolling stock cannot be debentured, but perhaps we need to amend that to change that so that we can put on a debenture on a fire engine, like we spend $922,000 on a pumper just now. And I'm just wondering if we could change that so we could debenture that, take into account all of the limitations on what we can pay and all the rest of the stuff and what we can borrow, but that just left with a couple of questions at the end of it, Mr. Mayor, so.
Well, perhaps we will put that particular question to the Quinlan Murphy on the financing department.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I mean, I think, since day one that I've been here, almost 7.5 years, is to minimize debt. That is the biggest thing that we've been working on. If you look at the reports, even the debt policy, we are the highest in the region for the amount of debt that our taxpayers have to pay through the tax levy per capita. So I agree. I mean, if we don't have any other alternative, then that's the last thing we do is take out debt. But if I could fund it through a reserve, even including the fire station, the fire truck or whatever it is there, I will fund it through the reserve first.
Okay.
That's just, we're just trying to keep those debt numbers down, unless we have no choice, for example, a large facility that we have to take debt out.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I agree with that. I think that's got to be the priority in the situation we're in. I'm just looking at the options, and there may be a time when we say, we're gonna buy a ladder truck, and that's going to be $2 million probably. Should we be debenturing something like that of that size? So, could I perhaps suggest a report on the priorities of debt and DCs and all the rest of the stuff, so that and perhaps leading up to the amendment of the rolling stock provision in the policy.
I'll turn to the CAO.
Oh, with respect, we've done that work this year. Like this calendar year, we've brought revised debt policy. Here's the development charge. The thing on the agenda is development charges, and to the extent that that's the only thing we're talking about, we think you're now on December the 4th, you will or won't pass the proposed bylaw. I think you're tracking towards doing it. And that study calls for what we think makes sense over 2 decades to come. But the key thing to recall is that you and future councils, it's a plan, and it's a plan based on a lot of good data and educated guesses and growth pattern and what have you. But at the end of the day, you control this every single year by the budgets when you make the actual decision. And so you're going to pass a 2025 budget shortly. And if you don't like the proposals, you have the power to change it. And then you'll do that again for 26 as well. You've got 2 more budgets to go. And that's where the rubber hits the road. The rest of it, they're thoughtful. They take months and years of effort, but they're just plans. The actual how we're funding something and how much is coming from debt, you control, and you're going to make major decisions in the next 3 weeks on that topic. So you have, the good news is you have the power and the control, but we have done 2 debt policies in 5 years. We've really kicked the tires hard. You've kicked the tire this calendar year. And what we really need is just fundamentally is the new bylaw. And I think you're at consensus. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry for misspeaking. If I'm right, we get that past December 4th. We've got another piece that guides how we'll make the 26 budget, which we're going to start really early next year, frankly. But the good news is you always have control. So that's if there are specific pieces, and you don't like how we're going to finance the next fire truck, the good news is you get to change that and tell us how. And what proportion should be debt versus, DCs is sort of set by the study, but we can move those things around from reserve to debt to in-year tax, whatever that is. So you always have the control, and that's the piece I hope you take away. But we have had the debt conversation, and we're going to drop below 10% at the end of the year on our ARL. And it's, you know, it was 15, we were at 15% in 2019, 15 point something, I don't remember the point, but like closer to 16 than we were to 15, and we're gonna be under 10. And I hope every member of the community understands how significant that is and do the dance of joy. Like the debt has shrunk enormously relative to the size of the community and the corporation. It's a good story.
Thank you for that, Mr. Zia. Believe me, Councillor, before I go back to you, I know that I sense your frustration that when you have one item that comes up, a piece of machinery, and it's 1.5 or 1.7 as it is eventually going to be, I can sense your frustration that maybe that is the time when we should be going over a 5-year period. But as the CEO has stated, it is a council decision that when that time comes, we will be able to make that decision. But anyway, back to you, sir.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I don't get frustrated, I just ask questions. That's just a question. I get frustrated when I miss dinner, maybe, not that, so, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments on, I'm sorry, and did anyone else poll anything on staff reports? Deputy Mayor Wink?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, the 9.1.2, the Q3 financials, the revenues for the total finance department shows actual as a percentage of budget shows 10%. It should be, I believe, 96%. So there's no way we're 10% on a revenue line item. So if you could have that corrected, please. Special events and festivals. Every year since I got involved with Summerfest, we would get a report on Summerfest on income and expenses and revenues and whatever, and attendance, all that type of stuff. Will we be getting a report regarding Summerfest, and when will that be if we are going to get a report?
I'll turn to Director of Recreation, Ms. Van Ravensway.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, the report is going to be coming on December the 4th, and you'll have a presentation by the committee chair on that night as well. Day.
I look forward to
that morning.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor want to discuss any items in the staff reports? Let's go this side. Ms. Nesnick. Councillor Nesnick.
Thank you. Yes, so just a comment with regards to the MCC net surplus deficit. So it looks like we're actually below the target of the deficit. So that's a bit of a good news story. Is that correct? Am I reading that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that's correct.
Yay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor on staff reports? Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. With regards to the same item and Appendix 3, the MCC, on electricity again, Mr. Mayor. Just so you know, I'm stuck on the same subject.
Yes, sir.
The MCC is amazing in the fact that we've been able to keep the annual expenditure on electricity for the last 5 years and going on 6 at $350,000 in that ballpark. When we first started in council way back when, we were headed for 520,000 plus.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I want to say kudos to the operating staff, the director, and the IT department that every week publishes or every load every 15 minutes and a graph, and it goes to the staff and Councilor Olson and myself where it's monitored. It takes a big commitment to keep on doing it for this long. And right now I'm projecting we're going to be $30,000 under budget again.
Excellent.
So, which is really excellent. That takes a lot of effort. I mean, to continue on year after year, that's a sign of commitment.
And obviously the commitment's well worth it with the results that we're getting. Excellent.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments on staff reports? Councillor Eckert.
Are we down to section 9.3 yet?
No.
Right, okay, thank
Okay.
you. I'll wait.
Yep, thank you. Council Olson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Here's a different way of reading financial statements. I look at this statement as being an excellent statement because it demonstrates that, our budgets and our things are being followed very closely by the staff. And I think Councilor Hildebrand is right. These are excellent reports. If the staff was not following the way the council wanted the town to run, these would be out of line, and they're not. So I appreciate that very much. I don't have any specific items except to say that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments on staff reports? Not seeing any. Turn to them, clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The next category, oh, sorry.
I just,
Oh, I'm
yeah.
sorry. Oh, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to add to what Council Olson said. Every single director here, every single budget holder really takes the budget very serious, and as the treasurer, that's one of the most important things, I think, when I'm working with my colleagues and with the town staff. It's a culture here. If someone can find a better way to save money, they do, and they're always happy to be under budget. There are other municipalities that I've heard of that are overspending. So I just wanted to say that it's the wonderful staff here that really take the budgets very serious, and I'm really happy that Council Olson acknowledged that. Thank you.
And of course, the rest of council also appreciates the work and commitment that the staff at the town puts into the budget and into cost-saving effects. Excellent. Thank you. To the clerk.
Thank you. The next category is information correspondence, which does include the region and item 9.3.
Okay, thank you. Now we go to Councilor Eckert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have read the response from the region in regards to the request of reducing the speed on Effingham Street from south of Weber to River from 80 to 60. I went out there the last couple of days. I see they've reduced it to 70. I still object to this. I just don't understand the reasoning where you have a 20-plus kilometer road that runs from Weber to Pelham Road in St. Catharines that's posted the majority of it at 50 kilometers per hour, and suddenly there's a 1.5 kilometer section that has to be an increased speed for traffic flow. It boggles my mind. And then it empties into a 60 kilometer. If you turn right, it's 60 kilometers. If you turn left, it's 50 kilometers. How that 1.5 section kilometer of road impacts the traffic flow so greatly, I can't understand it, and I think this response just lacks a lot of common sense. And that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe the region also wants to leave it at that. Thank you.
They do.
Any other comments? Go to Deputy Mayor Wink.
Thank you, Mayor. We skipped over 9.2.
Yes.
Just a question regarding vendor insurance. I know when I was on Summerfest, our insurance requirements were $2 million, and now we're 50% higher to $3 million. Can you please explain why we've increased from 2 to 3?
I will go to our legal, Ms. Sturton.
Through you, Mayor, to Deputy Mayor Wink, thank you for the question. There is no legal standard for the amount of insurance coverage that's required, but I would suggest that the industry standard is more along the lines of 5 million, not 2 million or even 3. That was effectively a compromise position taken by staff in order to meet the concerns of smaller businesses that may find 5 million to be prohibitive in terms of the premium cost. However, in the event that a person were to be injured, I'm thinking a young person with a good job who's catastrophically injured can no longer work, that $2 million is gone in the blink of an eye. So 3 million, in my view, is appropriate, but of course we'll take council's direction.
to the Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, it just seems a big jump for someone who is a crafter and selling knitted stuff needs $3 million worth of insurance unless the owner or the user swallows that thing and has a, like, it's, we're not talking big business here. When we're doing these events, generally it's small business, unless you're looking at maybe the tulip event or whatever. But when we're looking at something like Summerfest or whatever, you know, I don't see how we're going to be needing that $3 million. So I appreciate the comments on that, but that's my thoughts.
Let me go back to our legal, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I'll invite Ms. Leach to comment as well, but with the new special event permit bylaw that is being presented to council today, it's not every individual vendor who would be required to secure that kind of insurance. If there's a special event permit that's obtained by an organizer to cover all of the event, then if I'm understanding it correctly, there isn't a requirement for each crafter or knitter to obtain that sort of coverage, but perhaps Ms. Leach can comment.
Yes, thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. We've essentially changed the licensing process to remove those requirements from the smaller businesses, such as crafters attending larger special events, just so that it's not prohibitive in that respect. So Mr. N is correct. It would just be the special event organizer, and then any businesses that would be looking for a license outside of a special event.
So just for clarification, that means that someone as a vendor at Summerfest does not have to provide insurance of $2 million going forward.
Is that correct?
I believe that Summerfest is different. Yes, it's different from private special events. I would defer to Ms. Van Ravensway on that.
Ms. Van Ravensway?
Sorry. Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do require everyone to have a $2 million insurance policy if they're participating in our events.
Okay, thank you.
So I sense we're talking two different things then.
Correct.
Okay, thank you for that. Thanks for the clarification.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor Wink. Any other discussions on the consent agendas? Well, might as well we'll include both categories, obviously. And I don't see any. To the clerk, please.
And the final category is the advisory committee minutes, Mr. Mayor.
I'm sorry?
The last category is advisory committee minutes.
Okay, the last category. Any comments, questions on that? And not seeing any, turn to the clerk.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Kerr. Be it resolved that the consent agenda items as listed on the November 20th, 2024 council agenda be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion carries.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. That brings us to item 11, and we do have a presentation by Councillor Hildebrand.
Okay, Councillor Hildebrand, you have the floor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The aim of this report is to provide a clear vision of what's possible, inspiring staff and council to support proven innovative solutions. I have a picture of the building we went into because I've never been into an all-glass high-rise and with a different view of things over the skyline. This is actually looking over Lake Ontario. Interesting enough, I've never been in a building. The core was 6 elevators. You had to figure out which elevator to take, and we took elevator going from floor 21 to 29. The door selection was on the side frame, and it was a button. And you never saw anything inside the elevator other than which floor you were ending up. Different. And the other thing is, when we went to the first conference room, the other difference was it looked like you can walk straight out the conference room right out into the air. So if that doesn't, it didn't bother me at all, but some of my partners weren't that comfortable of having that view. Like, there's no bar, no safety. So the safety is you can't see any safety. Interesting. But going on to the reason why we went there, the town uses many of Cisco's systems and cameras specifically. When you go in the conference room, you see all the cameras around here. You don't see any of that there. Yet we went in the conference room, there's no mics, no nothing, and it's all working. They call that the one-button solution. You can imagine notes, minutes, seamless demonstration. Like I said, no mics, no visible cameras, no nothing. Amazing. When we went to the building is 10 years old. This floor had DC lighting. I asked them how many light failures they had, and they only had one that they had a problem with. And with DC lighting, you have no more electrician, you have no more copper wires. It's all internet wires. And the thing is, I'm going to talk a little bit later about cameras and how all this stuff works. We were introduced to Morgan Solar, who is partners with Cisco System. They provide the solar panels. They have solar panels in some of the windows facing the sun, and they rotate and they collect the electricity, which goes to a battery storage, which powers a conference room. And it's all amazing stuff. Software related, one of the things we talked about was peak shaving, and we're going to talk about that little later when we get to the MCC Solar, because that's where they have computer programs and industry uses it to reduce the peaks, to reduce your GA cost for buildings, which is really significant. With regard to integrated security and environmental controls, Centennial Park, we talked about that, remote lighting controls, and that Cisco provides that through Cisco Backhaul Solutions. Cisco's going to arrange with staff to see an appropriate team meeting to review that. Then coming along with some of the other things is the MCC scheduling, video access training, dashboards. Cisco is getting back to us on that. They have all the technology that does that. The amazing part is when we went there was QR codes. I don't know if you can see that, but that's my identification. Everything goes by QR codes. They know where you are in the building. They know what you're up to. They know your name. They know everything. But they have this traceability for the mining industry and all kinds of different industry to make sure, for safety reasons, they know where you are, which I thought was really. And the amazing part about cameras is the camera is not just a camera anymore. For them, the camera has options with like HVAC control, lighting control, alarms, and sensing technology. For instance, one of the things they do for the schools is there's no vaping in schools. And their cameras can detect when an individual walks out of a washroom and they've been vaping, that they've been vaping. So they thought that was really. They had a hospital room set up, and that was really unique because when people go to the hospital, they get all the stuff attached to them. Just an arm bandage, and it provides all the technical data for that person that showed up on a screen. Yeah, it's just the size of my watch. It's just but you put it on your arm. Yeah, So I've talked to a couple of emergency room nurses and doctors. The biggest problem they have is just supplies. So none of this stuff, I've seen none of this stuff in hospitals yet. It's developed technology that's readily available. A great day.
Yeah.
Long drive. Took a long time to get there and back, and we had a very busy day. But it was exceptional, and I expect to see many developments from this meeting through team meetings with the staff and proposals coming forward. Thank you.
Excellent. And I'm glad you got out of that elevator okay.
The hardest part I thought was going to be finding the car after we left. Because you keep going down in the circles, and you know which level you're at, but where was it?
Yeah, what direction? Yes.
That's right.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Councillor. I turn to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Eckert, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that Council receive the report from Councillor Hildebrand regarding the Town of Pelham's visit to Cisco Customer Experience Center, Toronto, for information.
Thank you. Any questions to the councillor on his report? If not, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? See none opposed, motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to our first staff report requiring action, being 11.2.1, Town of Pelham Ward Redivision Bylaw and Next Steps. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Niznik. Be resolved that Council receive report 2024-0202, and that Council direct the Town Clerk to prepare and present the ward boundary bylaw for consideration at the next regular meeting of Council, providing notice on the Town's website 10 days prior to its consideration. And that upon the enactment of the bylaw, Council direct the Clerk to notify the Assessment Corporation and the Chief Electoral Office of the newly redivided boundaries in the Town of Pelham. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments on this report? Councillor Kerr.
Yes, I guess the only addendum I would look at is that we've identified we're going to put it on the town website. I'm just wondering whether hard notification could be put in Pelham facilities that people frequent on a regular basis. I guess I'm looking at libraries, locations where people are going in and out that they could physically see it being identified. It's a little bit of proactive work, but maybe it's not totally functional, but I'm just thinking, again, a number of people are not regularly cruising the website to follow these kind of things, and this is something that has definitive impact on our electoral process.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great suggestion to the clerk.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Oh, to the CAO, I'm sorry.
We understand Councillor Kerr's concern, but understand as we speak right now, for a couple of months, we've been, and we continue to be engaging with the public about the next voting technology and mechanism. And I don't know what Council's ultimate decision next calendar year will be, but you're going to make one end of Q1, roughly, give or take a month. And that could, if it's online, that'll cease to have any significant meaning directly to the individual. But right now, like we're doing one type of marketing, and one kind of community engagement, which is on our Engaging Pelham site and their displays at the MCC. So you have a major decision, which will, and then when that decision is made, we're going to do a whole bunch of, like 2025 is going to be a lot of telling people how they can vote, when they can vote, where they can vote, like all those things. But you have a huge decision to make, which is what will the next election look like, and sort of the sky's the limit for you. But at that point in time, that's a good time to tell people how and when, rather than right now we're still going out to the public to get feedback. We've had pretty good feedback thus far on different technologies and different mechanisms for the vote. And we look forward to coming back to you. Madam Clerk is leading that initiative to sort of give you what the public has said, and then we've already given you some pricing, and we'll make those decisions. So I really think we should defer that while we already have one big election message out, and you kind of want to keep it one at a time. So we're hearing you, but if it's okay, we'd like to defer that into about the middle of next year as we roll out two pieces.
Councillor Kerr, perhaps a little premature on that. You agree with, you okay with that?
Yeah, that's fine. I was just thinking, like I said, we had the two municipal libraries. That's, to be honest, what I was thinking is posting what was on the webpage, or even maybe suggesting to people to double check the webpage. That's all.
All right. Thank you, sir. Any other comments on the report? Not seeing any. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? See none opposed. Motion carries.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Our next item is 11.2.2, supplemental agreement regarding extension of integrity commissioner term. I have a motion put forth by Deputy Mayor Wink, seconded by Councillor Hildebrand. Be it resolved that Council receive report 2024-0254 and that Council approve and authorize the execution of the appended supplemental agreement between the Corporation of the Town of Pelham and David Bogosian, Integrity Commissioner, as presented. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any comments or questions on this report involving the Integrity Commissioner and extending his term with the town? Not seeing any. I call the vote. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion carries. To the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our next report is a recommendation report regarding zoning bylaw amendment for Bauer Landing. I have a motion put forth by Deputy Mayor Wink, seconded by Councillor Kerr. Be it resolved that Council receive report 2024-0265 and that Council direct planning staff to prepare the bylaw for approval of the zoning bylaw amendment for Council's consideration at the next meeting. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments? Councillor Nesnick.
Yes, thank you. I just would like to comment that happy that the planning department was able to work with the developer in altering just having the one entrance and exit onto Quaker Road and altering the two properties to put two single dwelling units on Quaker. I think that will make it the flow, and then as well making sure the extension goes west into the other new subdivision that's going to be held there. I just want to make sure though that the planning department is satisfied that there is enough additional parking. I know it is right at the limit, but as you know, when we drive around streets, the number of cars that don't use their driveways for some ridiculous reason, they prefer to park on the street, I guess, so they can get a quick getaway. I'm not sure, but just are those private road widths wide enough for parked cars on the street, or is there and is there enough supplemental additional parking? I do see you have three spots there for additional, like 3 sections of additional parking, but just want to make sure there's going to be enough parking in that area. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I'll turn to Ms. Levac.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. There are 2 parking spaces for each unit between the garage and the driveway. A portion of that private road will also be a fire route, so it actually will not permit parking. And with this revised plan that you're seeing today, there's a reduction to the number of units by 2, but the visitor parking that's being provided remains the same. So we've actually gained parking relative to what you saw at the public meeting.
To the councillor.
Okay, good. That satisfies me then. Thank you very much again for all the hard work on this file.
Okay, thank you, councillor. Any other questions? Councillor Kerr.
Yes, just one quick question. It being a private road, and you highlighted about the fire and emergency services access to it. So being a private road with a restriction on it, does that come under the enforcement of our bylaw officers?
To the planner.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it does. It will actually be added to our bylaw of fire routes, and then it will be able to be enforced by our bylaw enforcement team.
Thank you, councillor. Any other questions, comments? Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I was the only one that didn't vote for the approval of this based on the Quaker Road reconstruction and the effect of this subdivision and the infrastructure that attaches there. Has any progress been made with the infrastructure? Because I'm concerned that, that the developer's just going to flip this property. He's not very interested in doing all the work he does, and then it just falls on the next guy and we're tearing up the road and sidewalk.
I'll go to Director of Public Works. Any comments on that statement?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So our engineering department is in communication with the region with respect to any changes that are occurring with this property. They hold bi-weekly site meetings. We attend those meetings. So everybody, the project team is aware of everything that's happening here.
Councillor?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Not seeing any. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? See none opposed, motion carries. Thank you to Manager of Planning. Thank you. To the clerk.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to staff reports requiring action that were deferred from November 6th. And our first item is 12.1. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Niznik, seconded by Councillor Eckert. Be it resolved that Council receive report 2024-0212, cemetery user fee information, and that Council adopt the recommendation to increase the Town of Pelham cemetery user fees for plot purchases and interments by 10% for 2025. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Questions and comments? I see Deputy Mayor Wink.
So I don't normally do this, but I will. I'd like to defer this item until we look at the operating budget and have discussion with it, because there may be opportunities here that will impact our operating budget going forward. If you look at the proposed rates, we are far below the average, and there is probably room to move this up further, which will impact our operating. So I would like to move it to be in concert with the operating budget.
Okay, thank you. Madam Clerk, no discussion on that, it's just a strict vote.
That motion would require a seconder, and then you may debate the merits of the deferral.
Okay, Councillor Eckert, you were second? Okay, thank you. Then on the deferral, is there we have the discussion? Or if there is no okay, Councillor Nesnick.
Yes, so thank you. I have no problem with if we wanted to defer it, but I was willing today to ask that that percentage increase be raised. I think the 10% raise is not sufficient when you look at the comparators of other towns and what they're charging for their cemetery plots. I don't know whether you want the cart before the horse or the horse before the cart. Either way, we can have that discussion at that time, but I definitely think a 10% raise. I'm not sure how you came up with that, whether you just didn't want to shock the residents who now want to go and purchase plots, but I think that if we should be well in the middle of the pack at least with regards to that. So another 5% increase up to 15, even 20% increase would be more realistic and within today's market reasonable to ask for that. So not sure.
Thank you, Councillor. I will turn to the CAO for any comments.
Maybe I could just offer some procedural support. So understanding exactly where Deputy Mayor Wink is coming from, let me give you two pieces of information that maybe you don't have right now that might change how you want to go procedurally. The first is our Deputy Treasurer and Treasurer have both done a bunch of work in the last 48 hours, and were they to be asked, they have some, they can offer you some data about the impact of different increase, something other than 10%, which would be a reasonable thing for you to you might consider the advantage of discussing some of that today, because budget is always a stressful meeting and it's easy to get off topic. So there might be some advantage to having some of that conversation today. And Mr. Siraj is online, Quinlan Murphy's physically present. They're actually capable of putting some stuff up on the screen if you wanted to see it. So that's an option you don't know you have. Secondly, if we defer, if you vote to defer, we're happy to respect that. But that'll come back on, we could, so you're going to, a week today, this time next week, you're in your operating budget meeting. The thing is, you can't make any binding decisions at that meeting. You're sitting as committee of the whole, so you're just talking about policy stuff. We can, if we're deferring this, we move it 2 weeks today when you're back sitting as a council, and then you can make binding decisions, including fees and services. So we could bring it back, although we can't make any decisions next week. We can make decisions 2 weeks from today. We can also make decisions today, but we have the capacity to show you what some different numbers are other than 10%. And I think, and sorry, finally, if I may, at the end of the day, a lot of our job is art rather than science. And coming back at 10% seemed, at the time, like a relatively aggressive suggestion from your staff. Most people, we've been trained in the universe of aiming for 2%, and so 10 is 5 times that, and that seemed, as far as, so if that was an error, that's certainly one made by the office of the CAO. But there's no art or limitation. There was art rather than science to that. Yeah. And the number can be 0 and it could be 30%. Like there are very different possibilities open to you. So you're welcome to defer. If you're going to defer, maybe we can have some discussion next week, but we can't really make any decisions on that. So I would submit, then it would just be defer the entire report for 2 weeks, and we'll sort of have some conversation then. But we can give you some really good analysis now, and you might still want to defer, but I think in a perfect world, one might withdraw the motion to defer and then bring it back if that's still the preferred methodology after you've had a chance to ask a couple of questions to the treasurer and deputy treasurer, who I think could be very helpful.
To the deputy, Mr. Wink.
So based on that new information, I would like to withdraw my motion for deferral and ask the treasurer and the deputy treasurer to make comments about possible recommendations for increasing and the impact it will have on the budget.
Okay, thank you, Councillor, I turn to the...
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to ask Usama, the deputy treasurer, to share his screen. And Usama, if you can just walk through the numbers that you have on the cemetery fee increases. I just have to make it a little bit larger.
Yeah.
No, we can't hear him.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody can hear me.
Yes, we can.
And you can see my screen?
Yes. Is there any way you can make it larger or not?
I can try to make it larger on my end. Okay.
Well, yeah, that's better.
Okay.
Thank you.
So as the CEO mentioned, we've done some work and analysis to give you scenarios, different scenarios in terms of what it would look like for not only the user fee, how it compares, and what impact it has on the budget. So just to kind of set the stage, if you have the no fee increase, this is where your fees are at. You're at $12.92 for resident, $20.49 for non-resident, and for interments, these are the fees, and this is how it compares to the rest of the municipalities, or the 5 that were studied. If we were to go with a 10% fee increase, based on our estimates, now keep in mind these are obviously estimates because there's a lot of numbers and variables that go into play, but based on our estimate, that would add approximately $28,000 above and beyond what's currently into the operating budget, which would mean an additional 0.15% off the levy. And I can put in whatever number you want in this calculator, and I can show you what the amount would be adding to. This is the additional dollars in revenue that we think it would add to the operating budget for 2025, and this would be the impact in terms of the tax levy as a percentage. And then I can also scroll down here and I can show you that, okay, currently we're at 10%. That would mean that this fee is going up by $130. This one's going up by $200. This one's $81.32. And now as a revised, this is what it compares. This is how it compares to the rest of the town. And this can all be done in real time. So whatever percentage you want to review, we can look at all those things together.
Thank you. If I may, can we hold the residents at 10, but take the non-residential up to, I mean, I think that's ridiculously low. Obviously, this is all council decision, but could we take the non-residential up 50% and then show us those figures?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So I think that one would be a little bit difficult to calculate on the fly because when I was looking at the historical data and comparing the numbers, I've taken the gross revenue figures, which have a combination of residents and non-residents, and based on my review, I think 80% of the fees for instance, plot sales were still tied to the residents. This is again basing on the data for the last number of years, the last couple of years. So what I may suggest is, if we go through a percentage increase, the way this is set up, we can have that discussion. And then if council wants to increase the difference between the resident and non-resident fee, we can have that as a secondary item. It's just really hard to determine how that will impact the budget because we don't really have good statistics on how many non-residents would come in if the fee was that much higher. However, I do see your point that some of the other municipalities, if you see the difference between the resident fee and the non-resident fee is much more significant. So maybe if council wants to pick a percentage of the fee increase as a whole, and then as a secondary item, if they want to increase the difference between the resident and the non-resident fee.
Okay, thank you. I'll just voice my opinion going forwards, and I'll open up the council. Anytime you have a 10% increase, that's in 1 year, I think that's, for me, that's a substantial amount. And that's how come I would have loved to have divided it, but I'll leave it at that. Yeah, I'll open it to council. Council, questions or answers? Councilor Kerr.
Yes, when I look at it, I guess I have an initial question. When was the last time that the cemetery user fees were increased? That's a prelim. Once I get that, then I can look at.
To the CAO?
We've increased them every year I've been here, but it's been 2 or 3%. It's just part of our fees, and that number's changed each year, but 2 or 3 is good for shorthand. I think it was a little higher the last couple of years when inflation was higher, but call it 2.5 over the last 5-6 years each year.
So I guess where that leads me to, what I do is I have a tendency to take a look at the next lowest relative to the municipality. And if I look at the residential one, it's Wainfleet, approximately $300 higher, which is about 25% more than what the town of Pelham is requiring right now. And that's the lowest resident in the community. Their non-resident, if you look at it, is $800 more, which is roughly a 40% differential at that point. And that's the lowest comparable municipality in the Niagara region. Port Colborne, I was intrigued that they just basically set theirs at $5,000, whether you live there or not. They were just, that's what you're getting charged, which is like 400% above what the town of Pelham charges.
Well, my thought on that is Port Colborne, you only got about 6 inches of soil, so you probably have to dynamite all their... Anyway.
Yes, I understand that. Let's just say that the challenges of that come into play. That being said, I understand the mayor's comment of anything over 10% is a large increase. However, we have been, based on what I've been listening to, is very marginal for the last number of years of almost the cost of living or whatever. And in fact, if it's only been 2 or 3%, there's a number of years where that's even below. When you think in the last 5 years where we had significant escalation in economics. It sounds really bad, and I have we're going after money from the dead. It really is psychologically a challenge. However, it's being responsible to the community as a whole that we have to think about where we sit relative to that. Being that far behind, at some point you're going to attempt to try and get equality or some degree of equality. By no stretch am I looking at going at I can understand for the non-resident and the mayor's position of, a 50% increase, and even when you do that, you're still so very close to the lowest one that's there, and still behind a number of other communities. It all comes back to facilities available, land available, everything else. So I'm instinctively going for. I'm probably leaning more towards a slightly higher charge, but anticipating escalation over time. But that's my position at this point.
Mr. CEO, any comments? Oh, I just saw your hand on the button. Let's go to Deputy Mayor Wing.
So for demonstration purposes, can you plug in 25%, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely. So that would add about additional $40,000. And I guess I should also mention the way the 2025 draft budget is presented to council. Currently, there's about a $50,000 shortfall between the revenues that are generated from cemetery operations and the expenses that are incurred to offer that service. So so in theory, you can raise fees up to a certain point. So we budget for revenues to equal the expenses. And then if we have any excess revenues, they go to the cemetery reserve fund beyond that. But you can choose to, increase the revenues by any amount up to that 50,000.
To the Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, so just for demonstration purposes, can you just show us what 25% would be for resident, non-resident, and how that compares to other communities, please?
Absolutely. So at 25%, that would put Pelham at about 1615, so pretty much in line with Waynfleet. And again, the average just will change because we're part of the average now, but we're still the second lowest among the municipalities that were studied, and then the non-resident fee, because if the same proportions maintained, would go up to 2,000.
So that didn't move, Osama. Non-resident didn't move.
Oh, the non-resident did not move. Okay. I guess it didn't update on the chart here, but I have it here. So the non-resident would go to, maybe this is a better way to look at it. So the non-resident would go up to 2561.
Which is still less than Waynfleet.
Right, which is still less than Waynfleet. So again, even doing this, the taxpayer's still contributing $10,000 a year for the operation of the cemetery. Even though someone might never want to utilize those services, they're paying taxes on it.
Done. Any further comment?
Actually, I'd like to see some other counselors comment on this.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Eckert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mike, I think 10% is a little low, but my biggest concern is about the non-resident. What we don't have on here is, say, what Welland and St. Catharines are paying, or even Niagara Falls, because if we're significantly lower in non-residential fees, then it's could be very attractive for residents from those municipalities to come here to Font Hill. And what's our capacity? Are we going to, and I see someone bringing their fingers like this, if we fill, it's not going to make much difference what we charge the residents if there's no place for them to go. So that would be my concern. I would rather see a significant increase in non-residential people, and then I could live with the 10% increase to residential. But that's my thoughts. It's more about capacity. So.
Okay, thank you, Councilor. Still stay okay. Okay, let's go, Councilor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councilor Wink that we need to substantially increase our rate, and we also need to increase the non-residential rate. But the other factor that we haven't talked about, and nothing's been done about, is the internment. I believe the internment should also receive the same non-resident treatment as well. It can't be held at the same rate as our resident. And that's a factor that isn't in any of these equations that I think should be there.
To the CAO.
Sorry, I'll defer. I thought those rates were changing as well, were included in there. But two things I would throw out for council's consideration, as this is an excellent discussion. But from a policy perspective, the first is that unlike almost every other service we offer, this one is finite. If we charge $10 to come skate, we use a bunch of that money to keep the arena in good operating condition, and the arena will still be there next year. It'll be there the year after. So you put the money back into the service. With the cemetery, you use it and it's gone, and gone forever. So, if resident A uses it, resident B cannot. So that there's a reason for at least break even or more than that. There's no law saying you have to stop at break even. The other piece, though, is understand that when we're talking about non-residents, it's true there's some possibility for if your rates are too low, and we're in danger of that right now for forum shopping, for just finding the cheapest burial. But also understand that you could live here for 70 years of your life, and for the last 2 or 3, you move into a care facility in Niagara Falls, or you move to be with an adult child in Port Colborne, or whatever that is. And then you pass away, and you're counted as a non-resident. I mean, you spent 60 years building the community, and then your last couple of years, because of medical challenges or personal life, you had to be just a couple kilometers over the border, and then you're a non-resident. And so it's true we need to have the number up high enough to discourage forum shopping and just looking for the cheap. But I think if you actually, if you're wanting to be placed somewhere for eternity, it's the place that means a lot to you. And I think a lot of, I think if you asked the various staff who, in fact, we have people in the room who assist people at the counter, you can get lots of anecdotal stories of mom wanted to be here, or dad wanted to be here, or whatever that is. So although we dramatically need to increase the non-resident fee, there is a valid purpose to people, committed to the community for decades and decades and decades. So the non-resident piece isn't like some sort of evil invading army. It's usually Pelhamites come back at the very end. So I throw that out there. So it's the one place where the distinction can matter, but it also can be misleading and lead to injustice if we go at it too hard. You might want to ask Mr. Siraj to show what 35 and 40% does, so that he can, for vis-a-vis the non-resident, because you're probably coming about close to the right number for residents, and see what that total does to revenue. There's a strong argument for break even at least. It is a finite resource, and when one person gets to use it, another never can. And that's the other thing that policy-wise should guide or should inform some of your decision. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Olson, you haven't spoke to it yet.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I think the internment costs, they're basically cost recovery. I don't think we can say that if you, just because you live outside of the community, we're going to recover the cost plus profit. That would not be a proper thing, I don't think. But I think the fees have to be raised, and maybe establish a differential we're going to maintain and for years to come, and perhaps it's $800 or $1,000 or whatever, and that'll expand as with inflation. So that's my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Kerr?
Yes, I'm listening to the whole comment of resident, non-resident, and this is all at point of sale. So if you live here, you're a resident, so then you can purchase it. Where this affects people is when they wait until the last minute to think about it, to purchase, then they become a non-resident, is my understanding, because I could purchase it as a resident here and then move to anywhere else in Ontario. I've already paid for it. I bought it as a resident. I'm coming in at that fee. So that's, I understand where he's going. My parents, and using them as an example, they're in Thorold. Why they bought there with a family that's been in Pelham for 160 years, I have no idea. But ironically, I think it came back to the dollar values at the time when things were done. They wound up buying, et cetera. So, but that's a whole other side story that you try and look at. The thing that also comes into here that stuck in my mind is the changes that have come relative to people in their burial situations. Most of us had thought of the traditional burial plot of side-by-side, large caskets, concrete, the whole 9 yards. Well, now with the advent of cremation and everything else, there's a lot more interments within a single plot with cremations than there are with full-scale bodies in caskets. And so I started keeping that in the back of my head as well, saying, well, okay, if the capacity is there from a plot, suddenly in theory, the cost for that plot suddenly drops dramatically relative to the number of users. Admittedly, it's a user that buys it and it can't be used by anybody else, but it changes the numerical values that can come into play. So that's why I can understand an increase. I drive through the hillside property on a semi-routine basis because I take care of my grandfather's plot, and my uncle's buried there, and there's some other things, and I see a number of things that I would like to have fixed. But again, we have a limited resource budget to do some of these things, and taking care of the predecessors and taking care of cemeteries to me is a pretty important thing. And that maybe that comes back to my father in the military service. You look after them all along and you take care of them because they were there before you. So I'm in favor of percentage differential increase between resident and non-resident. I think I'm quite surprised that we can do a traditional full burial for pretty much less, at 50% of the cost of any other municipality on this list. Somebody's underpaid, or we're really hiring part-time people with shovels to do work. That it just doesn't, those numbers don't add up to me when I have to look at relative other areas. I'm assuming that it's fairly standard in cost. So as I said, I'm not for a uniform percentage resident, non-residents. I'm for a percentage increase for the residents and a differential increase relative to non-residents at this point. And that if we can find a way to come to a revenue neutral situation for the budget, at least for this year, that I think finding that marriage of the two is, in my opinion, the best thing going forward, rather than being in a shortfall situation. I want to know that there's enough money there to keep everything going.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Neslik.
Yes, thank you. So Usama, can you just go back to the 25%? So what would a resident rate be now if you raised it to 25%? I missed that total there.
No problem. So I've updated the chart here now. So this is based on 25%, 1615.
And then could you punch in 50% and see what the non-resident rate is?
It's 3,074. So
Right.
I just want to clarify, the way I built a calculator is it's a universal fee across for resident and non-resident. I can quickly calculate what the increase would be, but it has a very minor impact on additional revenue. So for instance, when I looked at the data, there's only about 15% of the plot sales that I can see from the geo data that's in the system that appear to be coming from non-residents. So which is why I had built it in on a gross manner. So if you decide that you want to increase the plot sales and the burial fees together by whatever that amount is, 10%, 15%, that is probably that will probably have the biggest impact on the revenue. And then as a secondary item, you can say, well, now we want to increase the difference between the resident and the non-resident fee. So if you've for instance, if you've decided that you want to increase fees by 25%, that would set your resident fees to 1615. That would send your additional revenue to about 40,000. And then as a secondary item, you can say, well, now we want to change the non-resident fee to be at least 50% higher than what the resident fees are, or 80% higher, whatever that amount is. And that additional difference there is only going to have a very, very small impact on this overall number. So this calculator won't automatically calculate that, but if you want, I can kind of do it on the side and I can give you that information as well.
You have the floor.
Yes, thank you. So, yeah, that makes sense to me. So I do acknowledge that I think most of the revenue that comes from sales of plots is our residents. So, but that 1615 increase, as you say, that's where most of your revenue is going to come from. I think we do need to be really conscious that our cemeteries are, reaching capacity, or there is a finite amount of land there in the three cemetery, or well, the two cemeteries, and then they've got the one on Highway 20, but it also has a finite amount of land. So I think we need to go down this road and be in the middle of the pack. I don't think we want to be the cheapest sale of plots. And I'm not sure what to do with the interment. It does, when you look at the numbers, seem awfully low. I think we need to remember that once a person is buried there, for the next 50 to 100 years, that area is cared for by our town and those tax dollars pay for the grass cutting and the trimming, and we want to make sure that service is available. Nothing looks worse than when you go to a cemetery and they haven't been trimmed, and that's a lot of work. That I know our public works do. So I'm in favor of putting forth a proposal that those percentages be changed. And I'm quite comfortable putting forward that the resident fee be changed to 25%, and then the non-resident fee be altered to 50%. So I'll make that motion. I don't know if this is too early or whether that makes sense, but increasing those charges to those amounts, and then that will help cover the cost as well, bring us back up into line with neighboring communities.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Go ahead and put the motion on the floor, and then let's see what council does with it. So you're, again, to the clerk.
No, I believe that you would just be looking to strike that 10% from the motion and insert 25 per resident and 50% for non-resident?
Correct.
Okay, and I would be looking for a seconder on that motion, Mr. Mayor?
Is there a seconder on that motion at those figures? Okay, Councillor Hildebrand.
Okay, and to you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you. I'll open the discussion. I will not support this. I'm not going to be on a council that takes anything up 25% in 1 year. That's what I think. Council, go ahead. Comments? Councillor Kerr.
Yes, just a question. Does this result, we have sale of plots for resident, non-resident, but we have a single fee relative to interment, open and closing. Councillor Hildebrand had brought up the whole, should there be a difference between a resident, non-resident for interment and closing? But I'm just wondering whether those values are also going to be adjusted, because I noticed that the only thing that went up for traditional burial and cremation was at 25%, regardless of whether you were a resident or non-resident. So was that the intention of this? That's just my question.
Who would answer that? I'll turn to the CAO.
Well, I mean, the good news, Council, is you can control that by adjusting the motion, a friendly amendment to the motion either way. I think as a default, those numbers wouldn't adjust. We'd end left to our own devices. I think the last two, the interment fees, would likely, I think next month you're going to approve a new fees and services bylaw, and I think it'll be relatively close to the rate of inflation without knowing exactly what decision you're going to make. But so if you don't specify, then I don't think those adjust, and I think they'll go up by around 3%, whatever it is the will of council is next month. So if you want those specifically to change, you have a live motion on the floor, and you can address that any way you wish. But in the absence, I don't think those two adjust.
Okay.
Done for now, Councillor Kerr?
Yes, that's fine. I just wanted to know, so functionally they're separate from this.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Olson.
So if that happens, what happens to our the income over expenses on, if we raise it by the 25 then the 50%? What happens to that approximately? So we're saying Is that $40,000? You know, I
Yes,
don't,
through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, it would be additional 40,000, and possibly a few extra thousand to account for the additional 25% for the non-resident fees.
yeah. And that's the additional revenue, but, so, do we have a P&L for the cemeteries alone, how much we lose, or?
The amount that we've budgeted to be subsidized by the tax levy, essentially what doesn't come from the revenue, is about 50,000 for 2025 budget. So this would bring that down to about 10,000.
So that difference is 10,000.
If the fees were increased by 25%, yes. If the two fees that are in question in the report are the plot sales and the interment fees, the way the report was originally presented, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, the original report asked for a 10% increase for the two fees in question, the plot sales and then the interment fees for burial and cremation. So everything was to go up by 10% as the report was written. So if today it's decided that everything goes up by 20, or the resident fees goes up by 25%, non-resident goes by 50, and then the burial and the cremation also go up by 25%, then this would be the impact for additional revenue.
Okay. I'm opposed to the motion on principle. I don't think we should be profiting from our cemeteries or our internments or any of these things, so I would be voting against it, regardless of the amount of increase. Maybe at the 10, maybe to cover the cost, but that's it. Cost recovery alone.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. To the CAO.
I just wanted to say that I got everything I said wrong when last I spoke, so disregard that. So right now, you are impacting both sets in your, in the motion. So what I said was wrong. Both will change by, at the moment, 25 and 50 if there's support for it. So it won't be 3% later. It would be this now, and we would just slightly amend our fees and services report that'll come to you in December.
Okay, thank you, Mr. CAO. Councillor Nesnick.
Right, so just a couple points back towards difference in cost to buy a plot if this 25% is implemented is $323 per plot. Dollar change. That's not, I didn't calculate the change in the interment or the cremation cost. But the point is, we're not operating at a cost recovery right now. We're still, even with a 25% increase, we're losing $10,000 or asking the taxpayer to pay $10,000 to maintain our cemeteries. Right now, it's much, much higher than that. So we have to do something and stop going to the taxpayer all the time to backfill these holes, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any Councillor Hildebrand?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm still going back to the interment fee for non-resident, and I still believe it's appropriate. I believe making decisions at the last moment of your life is a poor way to plan your life. I think individuals that lived in Pelham all their life should be cognizant of the fact that planning ahead of time is the best way to go. And I'm a good example of that. Many years ago, my wife bought all the plots, so we know where we're going at the end of our life. And I think I'm the oldest member of council, so you all know where I'm going to be buried in town. So I'm committed to Pelham. That's right. Right on. So you get a premium spot too when you decide ahead of time. So I'd like to see a non-resident differential for interment as well. So that's my point of view.
Okay.
And I'm in full agreement with Councilor Niznik. We've got a limited amount. We shouldn't be going back to the taxpayer to get money to support our cemeteries, and we need to have our cemeteries maintained. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Olson.
Yes, could we clarify right now what the loss is on the cost on the cemetery? I've heard a couple of things, and I thought right now that the loss is $10,000 on the cemetery.
Yeah, if we do the increase.
To our legal?
Yeah, right now in the 2025 budget, correct me if I'm wrong, Osama, it's $50,000 that there's a shortfall. If I look in prior years, In 2022, there was a $60,000 shortfall. In 2023, it was $68,000. And the budget for 2024 shortfall is $74,000.
And that's in the next budget, 74,000?
Yeah, for 2024, and for 2025, right now, it's 50,000. Is that correct, Usama?
Yes, it's if you look at your budget document, it's page 45 of the operating budget document that shows the bottom line net levy requirement for cemetery operations is about 49,594. So I rounded up to 50,000. And just to clarify, Councillor Olson, what I was saying is if you were to increase the fees by 25% for plot sales and for interment, that would generate about additional 40,000 that would not need to come from the levy. So then the difference would only be 10,000.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Eckert.
Yes, I would be in favor of Councillor Nisnik's motion. I don't believe we're in a profit-making situation by raising these fees. Which if we were, I would be against that. Also, in relation to the mayor's comment, I think for any other aspect of municipal government, I would certainly be not in favor of a 25% increase. But when we're looking at what that actual increase is, and where it positions us with other municipalities, then I think it's quite reasonable. So in that regards, I would support that motion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments before I call the vote? I see Deputy Mayor Wink.
Yes, so I understand what you're saying about the 50%, but that puts us well above the average for non-resident. So it's going to be roughly $4,000.
2,000 is only $3,000.
I saw, what do you got for 50%, Osama?
It'll be about 3,073.
3,000.
Okay.
That's all.
So that's roughly average then. Okay. Thank you for that.
No problem.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it would be slightly below average if this, very close to the average.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Councilor Nesnick?
So just after hearing conversation, would a friendly amendment be that the non-resident interment costs also be increased by 50%, not just the 25%? Or do we want to? I'm fine to go either way. I just wonder what the will of council is on that. Before we take it to the vote, we can friendly amendment it and then make the vote on that.
So just to be clear, I'd say that one more time. So you say the residents go up 25.
Both sale plots and interment would
Yes.
go up 25% for residents. Non-residents for both sale and interment would go up by 50%.
Okay, thank you.
The other option, when the original motion had that just the non-resident sale plots went up 50%, not the interment. But I'm making a friendly amendment that non-resident 50% across the board, resident fees across the board, 25% increase.
So basically, you're changing your motion, really.
I am friendly
Sorry.
amending it, yes.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe the original motion did cover both plot purchases and interments.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments?
Can I,
Councilor Kerr?
I guess I see the Director of Public Works kind of waving. Again, the thing that came back was the economics of interment that it was a huge differential. I wonder if there was a comment from their side of whether these are recovering the cost that the town actually incurs or whether this is below really what they think it is.
Sorry, I just want to remind Mr. Siraj that we can see your screen at the moment.
Thank you.
So my question was the Director of Public Works about the values that were put in for interment, that they're so much lower than any other municipality on this list.
To the Director?
To you, Mr. Mayor. So the intention of the report was that we would increase the plot purchases and the internments by a set percentage, however council decided to make that decision. To be clear, right now, we only have one fee for internment. There is not a non-resident fee for that. So the intention would be if council picked 25%, the plot purchase would go up by 25%, the internment cost would go up by 25%. We do currently have a non-resident rate for the purchase of plots. So if council decided to push that to 50%, then that would apply. But as it stands right now, and the way this calculation is set up, we do not have a non-resident rate for internments, only for plot purchases.
Councillor?
I'm going to go backwards. The values that are put in for the internment costs right now, regardless of any increase, are substantially lower than any other community on this list. And my question was, how are the town of Pelham values for those so much lower than any other community? We're at $812. The next closest, when I look at this, is $1,148. And if I look at cremation, we're at $319, and the next closest is $556. That's a pretty big spread between communities for what I'm considering the same activity. So I wasn't sure how come we're that much cheaper than everybody else, I guess is the question.
To the
Through you,
treasurer.
Mr. Mayor, it's what the CEO said earlier, that the increases were only minimal, like 2%. We fell behind.
Right.
Yeah. Because in total, when you look at the cemetery cost center, the department, it's in a shortfall.
Right.
So that's part of the shortfall.
That I guess that's what I'm driving at, is that we're at a shortfall that we're not really at the real costs.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? So again, my reasoning for voting against this, when this council came into, got elected, especially back in 2018, my first term as mayor, and we looked at the town water rates, we had water rates that were the lowest, I believe, in the region. We did not, in one jump, go to 50% higher. We went 8%, 8%, 8%, so that now we are middle of the pack. I'm still not, I realize what everybody's saying, and yeah, you could talk here all day. We are subsidizing the burial of residents and non-residents. The fact of the matter is that we were negligent the last couple of years, and now all of a sudden we're gonna, again, it's only $300. People don't look at that, they look at the percentage that it's going up. And I will not support doing this in one fall. If you wanted to go even 15 and 15 and 15, I could support that, but I will not support a 25% jump. I just will not do that. So unless there's any other comments, we will call the vote, and we'll, any other comments? Everybody has spoken to it at least once. I'll call the vote. All those in favor of the motion? Go. And motion, all those opposed? Motion carries. To the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That brings us to the main motion as amended. So instead of that 10%, it would read 25% for residents and 50% for non-residents. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Again, any further comments, discussion? Call the vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Oh, so council, we have been sitting for 2.5 hours. Let's have a 10-minute biological break, please. Thank you.
I got my blood. Now you understand what to do, right? I'm gonna go buy 25 plots at today's prices.